Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97 Eric 877-973-7425. Let's go to the phones. Christine, you're going to be up first. Welcome.
Hi, Eric. I just wanted to let you know, first of all, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Fauci needs to retire yesterday. And as far as the masks go, what a lot of people don't realize is that, yes, they're protecting others by having the infected not be able to pass it around as easily. However, people are infectious 2 days before they even show symptoms.
Right.
So having everybody wear a mask at that time was probably the best thing that could have been done in this scenario.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And a lot of people have gotten very dogmatic and either defensive or angry about the mask situation. And my situation is there was a lot of unknown about this virus at the time. We now know that as the virus has evolved and we've got more of the variants, that it lingers in the air. And if you're not infected and wearing a mask, and you breathe in that particulate, it could potentially get you infected. Although at the same time, there are lots of events where a lot of people probably should have gotten infected who didn't. There's still a lot of unknown out there. And at the time, it made some sense. And part of my frustration was always the initial lie that we now know wasn't true. That you shouldn't, the masks are no big deal, don't wear them. And so people didn't. And then they're like, whoa, you got to wear a mask. And now we're at that weird part where a lot of people can't give up the masks. They've become almost like wearing a crucifix or having your prayer beads with you or something. You got to wear the mask as a religious symbolism or something. No, take your mask off now if you're vaccinated. And if you're not vaccinated, go get the vaccine or don't. I don't care at this point. There's been enough time. Speaking of, what we're not hearing about anymore? When's the last time you heard about a super spreader event? As more and more people have gotten the vaccine, we're less and less at a point where anyone needs to worry about it. Do you know in the UK and Israel now, because they have such a massive vaccination rate, they're at 0 COVID deaths. There are people who get COVID. There are people who get vaccinated who get COVID, but they're at 0 deaths. It is remarkable to see the progress. It is remarkable to see them able and willing to get their country vaccinated at such a rate that the numbers begin to collapse. It's great. The CDC announced its mask guidance on May 13th, and cases are declining at the exact same rate as before. And remember the great liberal freak out over them getting rid of the mask mandate. The level of virtue signaling out there from these people has always been appalling. Back to the phones we go. 877-97 Eric 877-973-7425. Paul, you're going to be next. Welcome.
Hi, Eric. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I was explaining to my son who goes to South County Schools, and you reported I believe it was last week, about the critical race theory in the board meeting.
Yeah.
Of course, his response was he thought people were crazy for even thinking this way. Talked to some of his teachers, and he told me as they got out of school last week, according to some of his teachers, that South County would not be pursuing that after the pushback from that meeting.
Yeah. Let me explain this in a broader context, Paul, of what's going on. So Paul and I are here in Georgia, for those of you who aren't, and there's a group out there that is pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is, when you hear diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can say it's not critical theory, but that's where it comes from. And a lot of school systems are hiring diversity, equity, and inclusion people to advance the critical theory nonsense in schools, and very much like the schools that embrace Common Core and then say, well, it's not called Common Core, so it's not. They're still doing it. You got to be vigilant. You know it when you see it, when this stuff starts invading your schools, and you gotta pay attention to it. When your schools start peddling diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're peddling critical theory. By the way, diversity isn't bad, but you will note that diversity is always
30.
prized based on skin color, not intellectual differences. As long as you've got a bunch of red, yellow, black, and white people who are left-wing socialists, there's diversity for you. No one wants the diversity of life and experience and intellectual thought. That's why diversity can be such a scam. It is Erick Erickson here. Welcome back. The phone number, should you wish to be a part of this here program, 877-97-ERICK, E-R-I-C-K, 877-973-7425. Let's go back to the phones. Bill, you're going to be up next. Welcome.
Hey, Eric.
Hi there.
How you doing?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm good. Congratulations on making the big time.
Thank you very much.
I've got a question for you.
All right.
I heard you talk about a recipe using chicken breasts and butter, and you said you were going to fix it for your wife on Mother's Day. And I was real interested in that, but it's not on your recipe list.
I knew you were going to ask about this, so it's there now. And I'll email it out to people next week, since the white barbecue is going out today. Yes, okay, it's called cornflake chicken. For those of you who don't know what Bill is talking about, I am notoriously terrible about sending out the recipes, and I pay a millennial to remind me to do these things, and he never reminds me. It's all his fault. It's really mine. But it's a very easy recipe. So I've been making this dish, Bill, since I was 8 years old. I got a cookbook. It was a Betty Crocker kids cookbook when I was a kid because I was such a picky eater. My mother finally threw up her hands one day and told me I was going to have to cook for myself. And so I did. I was cooking with cognac when I was 6 years old in Louisiana. And then we head off to Dubai, and I keep cooking. And I discovered cornflake chicken, which is super easy. And if you go to ewerickson.com and click the recipe tab, it's the very first recipe. I just put it up there just for Bill, and I'll also email it out next week for people on the recipe list. But very simply, you take chicken breasts, 4 to 8, preheat the oven to 350. You add Cajun seasoning to melted butter, dip the chicken in the butter mixture, and then roll it in crushed cornflakes. Put them in a baking dish, pour the extra butter and Cajun seasoning over them, and stick it in the oven for an hour. It is super easy. It's also very good. And my wife, when we started dating, I made her this dish. It is super simple. For some people, it sounds a little off-putting, but you add the Cajun seasoning, Tony Chachere's Cajun seasoning, and the cornflakes together, and it's a perfect dish. I have graduated now to fancier dishes, but my wife still loves this one. It's what I had to make her for Mother's Day. So you can go to ewerickson.com. You can see the recipes. You can also text the word recipe to 33777, and you'll get a link. You click the link, put in your email address, and you'll get on the email list. I don't sell the list. You're not going to get spam. You're not going to get advertisements. You just once a week or so going to get an email that has a recipe. That's it. All right. We got to move on to the Democrats. I'll keep taking your phone calls, though. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Wait, before I switch topics, something else on critical theory here. Akeem, you're going to be next. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Eric?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm an African-American father of 2 boys. You know, our kids are growing up not hating each other, but if they continue to allow this, I'm African-American, if they continue to allow to teach this critical race theory, then now this whole next generation will go up hating each other.
Yeah.
And I just want to know how many African-Americans are pushing back. Any stats, any numbers of how many African-Americans just, I know a lot of my friends, we totally are against it because it doesn't help. I'm with school choice because that would help. And you can speak about the Black Lives Matter guy who's left, who quit it because of this same topic about school choice.
Yeah, look, I think again that the predominance of critical theory comes from a bunch of white elite people and a few non-white people who figure they can make money off the guilt of the white elite. And most people don't want it, but it is pervasive at the academic level. It is pervasive in the progressive institutions. And everybody's got to stand up against it because it is the new form of racism. The idea that your child should be so protected from white people that he should go to a segregated college and live in a segregated dorm and eat in a segregated lunchroom sounds like the 1950s and Jim Crow to me, but yet the neo-racists of critical theory want you to know it's for your own good. It's you know what, Akeem, this is a perfect jumping off point here. Thank you for this phone call, because I'll get to the filibuster and Joe Manchin here in a minute, but let me just recap on this again so you understand this. The very basic idea within critical theory is that you are not you. To understand critical theory, you've got to understand that one of the basic tenets of the idea is that you are part of a class of people. And you individually do not rise and fall. Your class rises and falls. And if you are non-white, you are in an oppressed class. And if you are white, you are in an oppressor class. And if you are an oppressed class, you can never be an oppressor class. And if you are an oppressor, you can never be an oppressed class. And it makes racial reconciliation impossible. It denies your individuality. I played a clip of a teacher who had bought into critical theory, who told a Latino police officer he was always going to be a Mexican, even though he was a police officer. He would never be a white person. The idea there is that white people formed police brigades to round up slaves, which is historic revisionism, but they believe it is true. And if you are a non-white person operating as a police officer, you are trying to fit into white supremacy culture, and you will never be allowed. The critical theorists take from you your individuality and apply to you your race, your disability, and your sexuality, and tell you you can never be more than that. You must be defined by who you sleep with, which bathroom you use, and the color of your skin, forever and in perpetuity. It is the most racist and bigoted ideology on the planet, and it is peddled by a bunch of people who have convinced themselves they are the least racist and bigoted people among us. But you must pay attention at all times to skin color and sexual preference and bathroom choice. It is the thought process of the insane asylum. And it has taken over academic institutions and the Biden administration. And all of us have an obligation to push back on it. In that regard, inside media institutions are yet again pushing forward with the filibuster. And where is Joe Manchin? The Washington Post, Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, literally ran an op-ed in the Washington Post saying, I will never, ever, 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 never, ever, ever, never, ever support repeal of the filibuster. And yet they're at it again. Pressure mounts on Manchin as panic sets in among Democrats over voting rights. Democratic leaders and activists are urgently stepping up pressure on Joe Manchin III to support legislation to fight Republican-led voting restrictions across the country, with party officials increasingly concluding the battle over voting rights could come down to what the centrist Democrat from West Virginia does in a rare show of public frustration with his own party on Tuesday. President Biden appeared to lash out at Manchin when he accused a pair of unnamed senators of aligning too closely with Republicans and stalling efforts to pass sweeping voting standards. Senate Majority Leader Charles E. Schumer, Democrat, New York, recently announced that his chamber would vote this month on a House-passed election bill co-sponsored by every Democratic senator except Manchin, a move that would force Manchin to pick a side in a fight that has taken on new urgency in recent weeks. Y'all know, the Democrats don't actually want to pass this legislation. I hope you realize that the Democrats don't really want to pass H.R. 1. They don't. And they know that Joe Manchin is not going to cave on the filibuster. and they can blame him, and that helps Joe Manchin and preserves the Senate Democratic majority. You are being played. The Democrats don't want to pass H.R. 1 because if they did, the federal government would begin a process of funding Marjorie Taylor Greene to the tune of several $1 million every campaign season, because one of the elements of H.R. 1 is that the federal government will begin providing money to candidates for office. Do you really believe that the Democrats in Washington, D.C. want to fund Marjorie Taylor Greene's campaign in Georgia? Do you really? They want to do the legislation and advance it to rile up the Democratic base and fundraise from them. They have no intention of passing H.R. 1. Remember, we're in a postmodern age where performance matters more. By going through the ritualistic kabuki theater, they get to claim they want to pass H.R. 1, knowing it will not pass. They get to blame Joe Manchin, knowing he will not cave. And they get to say, well, we tried, give us more money and increase our majority next time, guys. Again, do you really believe the Democrats want to fund Marjorie Taylor Greene's political campaign? If this law passed, that would happen. You know they don't want to do that. They want the performance. They want the fundraising. They want the passion. They want Democrats enraged to show up at the polls next year, remembering that those Republican racists and that Joe Manchin racist from West Virginia blocked the voting rights bill. It's all his fault. But the Democrats don't even want to scrap the filibuster. They say they do. And again, you got to remember, it is performance. We live in an age where performance shows your sincerity. So the Democrats performing convince their base they are sincere. But let's play out the filibuster. We're in a 50-50 Senate. If the Democrats scrapped the filibuster, what would happen? They can't even get infrastructure passed. You know, they were going to have a second bite at reconciliation. The Senate parliamentarian told them they could. They can't even get reconciliation passed, and that doesn't have a filibuster. Republicans, when Donald Trump took office and the Republicans controlled Congress, did a massive rollback of regulations from the end of the Obama administration. I forget the name of the legislation, but there is legislation wherein in the last 3 months of any presidential administration, the new administration with a majority vote in Congress can roll back all of those regulations passed in the last 3 months of an administration. And the Senate cannot filibuster them. So the Republicans systematically rolled back a number of Obama administration regulations, and the law says once rolled back by Congress, they can never be reenacted. The Democrats don't have a filibuster to stop them, and yet they managed to only repeal one Trump-era regulation on the environment, and it required Republicans joining them to get it done. They didn't have the filibuster to worry about and still couldn't get it done. They have a 50-50 Senate, and even where the filibuster is not an obstacle, they're having trouble rallying their own side. Now, the odds are the Republicans will take back Congress next year, the House, and maybe not the Senate. So next year, they can't get anything passed through a Republican House, so the filibuster won't matter. And then in 2024, the Republicans will be on offense. Over 20 seats will be held by Democrats in defense. The Republicans will only have 10 of the 33 seats that are being challenged. Of the Democrats, a majority of them, not a majority of them, half of them, I think, roughly half of them, will be in states where Donald Trump won either once or twice. The Democrats will be on real defense. The odds are very good, the Republicans, if they don't take back the Senate next year, will take back the Senate in 2024. If they take it back next year, they will expand their majority in 2024. So do you really believe that for a year in a 50-50 Senate where one of those Democrats could die and a Republican could appoint a replacement, a Republican governor, and put Mitch McConnell back in charge, do you really believe the Democrats really, truly want to get rid of the filibuster right now? Do you really, truly believe they really want to pass H.R. 1 right now and fund Marjorie Taylor Greene's reelection campaign? If you do, I've got a bridge to sell you.
listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect blend.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson. Delighted to have you nationwide. I need to inform you of the great crisis in America. It's the crisis we want, because it's not a crisis at all, unless you're in the media. Here, now, Matthew Littman from CNN.
So the surge has been going on for a while. This has been about a year and a half. It even actually started before COVID. We were seeing a big rise in gun sales. And now what we're seeing is a lot of first-time gun buyers are Black people or Latinos. They're leading this surge in gun purchasing. And Michael, it's crazy to say it, but it's like an arms race amongst people. It's like, you know, how we used to have the United States and Russia building new nuclear weapons. Now it's Bob and Michael getting new guns. And people are doing it because they feel the United States is a very individualistic society, and people feel a need to protect themselves. So, you know, 99.9% of the people, Michael, very good gun owners, very few people make a big difference when they're not.
And one more also from CNN.
Right. So you're seeing both the mass killings skyrocket, and the sad thing is that this Florida attack, or the ironic thing is not yet qualifies as a mass killing because only 2 people are dead, even though this was like an assault spray to a group of people who were standing outside a club. And then you see the single homicides that are increasing in various areas. That is a combination of factors. This is typical, unfortunately, as the weather gets warmer. We're also seeing the sort of everyone out after the pandemic. But one thing to remember is gun purchases skyrocketed during COVID. It's absolutely skyrocketed 3 times, 4 times in various parts of the country, including amongst women. So you're seeing, in all likelihood, the use of what's a massive surge of weaponry out into the streets and into people's homes.
Yes, massive purchases of guns, of course, leading to gun violence. They would say, here's a New York Times headline. With homicides rising, cities brace for a violent summer. Homicide rates in large cities were up more than 30% on average last year and up another 24% at the beginning of this year, according to criminologists. Y'all, guess what? When you defund the police, or the police decide they can't come protect you because they'll get condemned by the critical theorists among us, you got to protect yourself and your family. And how do you protect yourself and your family? You go buy a gun. And you learn how to use that gun. And then the media condemns you for protecting yourself. Do you know what you call new gun owners in this country? Republican. And more Black and Hispanic people in this country are buying guns, and they're moving to the right. That is another reason the Democrats have revved up their efforts screaming about racism in this country. They're trying to keep Black and Hispanic voters from voting Republican, but their policies are forcing them into the Republican Party. There's actually a big story about the rise of the Hispanic voter moving to the GOP. We'll get into that. But first, when we come back, will evangelicals for Biden be called to repent like Trump voters were? Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson. Delighted to have you with me. The phone number, should you wish to be on the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You can get me on social media, EW Erickson, pretty much anywhere, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, EW Erickson. And you can always go to ewerickson.com. EW Erickson, kind of EWERICKSON. If you're in Tulsa, Dayton, Jacksonville, or Orlando, Mark K will be back tomorrow. I've been dying to get to this segment of the show today. Unfortunately, he can't listen. We'll have to put the video up for him. I'm going to record it. We also put up clips of the show on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. I got a friend of mine, Andrew Walker, works at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He is an ethics professor. He is an all-around good guy with terrible taste in music. So he put up a tweet, and I want to meditate upon his tweet, because my goodness gracious, some people are upset with him. Are we going to get any anguished think pieces on the compromised moral witness of Biden voting evangelicals? Now that LGBT flag, he forgot the Q and the plus. Are we going to get any anguished think pieces on the compromised moral witness of Biden voting evangelicals now that the LGBT flags are flying at the U.S. Embassy to the Vatican and proposed taxpayer-funded abortion is a thing? Or does the narrative only flow in one direction? Or maybe what we're learning is that voting rationales are complex, layered, and all the shame heaped upon Trump-voting Christians by their cultural betters was either simplistic or in bad faith. Well, my goodness, he certainly got a big reaction from the usual suspects. I made sure to retweet him. I want to actually talk about this for a minute. And you know, y'all know where I stand. I am in seminary. Consider myself an evangelical Christian of Orthodox beliefs across the board. But I really don't care where you stand on the issue. I mean, for theological purposes, yes. But for your day-to-day civic life, I don't care. You can support the transgender agenda, the alphabet gang agenda, the abortion agenda. Okay. We can agree to disagree. The problem is, of course, you'll be made to care these days, and it's always my side who has to agree. Why the hell, by the way, are we the culture warriors when we're just like, this is the way things are? No, we must change. But somehow I'm the cultural warrior for standing still. I don't get that. But the secular culture writes the playbook until we get to heaven, and then they realize they had the losing playbook. But nonetheless, there have been massive piles of hand-wringing for years over evangelicals supporting Donald Trump. Now, I will tell you, and I need to get into some of my history here so that you understand it. I did not support Donald Trump in 2016. I did in 2020. I did not in 2016. In 2016, I said character counts. Donald Trump has repeatedly said that he has never, ever had anything he needed to repent for. In fact, to this day, Donald Trump maintains that. And to be a Christian, you have to repent. And I don't want to vote for the guy. I don't want to vote for him. I didn't vote for Clinton. Many people told me if you don't vote for him, Clinton's going to get elected. She did not. He did. After he was elected, I realized that a lot of the things I expected to get from him, I did not. In fact, we got a lot of great policies from Donald Trump. You may not like Donald Trump, and I'm not a fan, but we got a lot of really good policies out of the Trump administration. And he had a great way of exposing the elite and the experts as wrong. Remember that massive Middle Eastern war we were going to get by moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Remember the massive international boycotts we were going to get by getting out of the Paris Accord. Remember the Iranian tactical nuclear strikes that we would see by getting out of the Iran deal. Remember the economic wreckage we would get by his tax cuts. Remember all of the dead people caused by net neutrality repeal. A lot of the experts made a lot of bold claims and he proved them wrong. He was also inarguably the most pro-life president in American history. Republicans had continued to fund Planned Parenthood, and Donald Trump found a way to defund Planned Parenthood that was upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the most liberal circuit in America, when he said that because money is fungible, organizations that perform abortions can't get federal funding. No prior administration, even the very pro-life George W. Bush administration, had done that. He put Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. He put a lot of pro-life people there. Now listen, I don't care for the guy. He's I mean, to use the phrase, he's not my cup of tea. I like Mike Pence a lot. Mike Pence and I are longtime friends. But in 2019, I said, listen, a lot of the stuff that I thought we were going to get from Donald Trump, we didn't. In fact, we got very good stuff. He surrounded himself with very good people. And I'll vote for him in 2020. My breaking point with Trump really was the aftermath of the election and the January 6th stuff. And I thought he overplayed his hand there to his detriment and the nation's detriment. But I would have much preferred the Trump administration than the Biden administration. I want that all on the table so you understand where I come at this. In 2016, I was very much of the opinion that I think evangelicals have to be careful. They are going to harm their witness. And I do think that you saw a lot of that with people like Robert Jeffries and Jerry Falwell Jr. and the like, who made it very difficult, I think, for a lot of evangelicals. It's one thing to go out there and say, I'm voting for this guy. I don't necessarily like him personally. I think he's got some character problems, but it's going to be a Republican or a Democrat, and I would rather a man who's going to protect the innocent unborn and defend American interests instead of someone who's going to push an abortion agenda, persecute churches and Christians, and apologize for everything America's ever done. The problem is that the cultural elite, also within a number of Christian publications, rushed out with all sorts of condemnatory pieces on evangelicals. Now listen, I tried to explain one time on television, I believe it was on CNN, I think it was CNN, was trying to explain this as an evangelical Christian. Why would evangelical Christians vote for this guy? Like, have you not paid attention? The Obama administration literally was persecuting nuns who did not want to perform abortions or pay for the performance of abortions. The Obama administration was literally targeting Christian faith-based businesses, family-owned businesses like Hobby Lobby, punishing them because they did not want their money to go to murdering children. During the Obama years, butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers were forced to provide goods and services to gay weddings. The left was culturally emboldened to persecute Christians. They were targeting Christian private schools. They were targeting Christian institutions. The Obama administration's own Solicitor General argued that, yes, faith-based organizations and churches could see the end of their tax-exempt status if they did not support gay marriage. So a lot of Christians in this country looked at Donald Trump and said, you're not one of us, but you're not out to get us. I'll go with you. As opposed to Hillary Clinton, who really was out to get them. Poor Harambe. I think that we have to recognize and understand that it's a complicated choice. And it always was. And while I didn't go along with a lot of my friends on the right in 2016 and 2020, I thought, I could support this guy. But among the cultural elite, also within Christendom, there's been derision, ridicule, and shame heaped upon anyone who would come out and say, I'll take him over them. There was a group formed, Evangelicals for Biden, much heralded in the press, by the way. The Evangelical Alternative. This reminds me back, if you'll remember in 2010, 2011, with the rise of the Tea Party, the left offered up the coffee party. And the New York Times did a massive profile of a bunch of leftists who get together and rail against the Tea Party, and they're going to have the coffee party. And they're going to organize, and they'll drink coffee instead of tea. Actually, they'll drink mocha latte and frappuccino nonsensical stuff. And they would get together in their little Starbuckses, and they would read the New York Times, and they would lament those bigoted Southerners and their Tea Party nonsense. And it was going to be big. And they did the same thing with Evangelicals for Biden in 2020. Oh, they're not like those Hicks and Root, the Southern Baptists. Those Presbyterians from the PCA. And those white Methodists from the South who don't want gay marriages performed in their churches. Nope. We're the open and tolerant Christians. Our brains are so open, they actually fell out. And we're voting for Joe Biden because Donald Trump, he might be the Antichrist. If you pulled up the comb over, there could be a 666. Not that we really believe that sort of stuff, but had to vote for Joe Biden. They didn't want Trump. And you know what? I have told a lot of people and have said for a very long time, I understand not voting for Donald Trump. I do. If you're a Christian, you are deeply committed to your faith. You're kind of ashamed at some of the brain biblical donkeyiness you've seen from some people within evangelicalism as they've decided to apologize and defend everything Trump said. I remember in 2016 when he was praising Planned Parenthood, and you had certain pastors come out and say, oh yeah, Planned Parenthood does great stuff. They kill babies. But man, they do some good stuff in the community. Donald Trump said so they must. It's like, you can actually say he screwed up. You are allowed. I was criticizing George W. Bush when he was president. I was running redstate.com at the time, and they were sending people to Red State to respond to my criticisms. They never got death threats from Republicans for criticizing George W. Bush. I did for criticizing Donald Trump. I criticize everybody. I'm kind of a man on an island these days. I'm a conservative Republican who was an elected official, who's an evangelical pro-life Christian who supported Donald Trump in 2020, but I'm willing to say I disagree with this. And my goodness, some people don't want you to disagree. But then there's Evangelicals for Biden. If you didn't like Trump in 2020, you could have written someone in. You could have just not voted for president. You could have written in, I don't know, Jesus Christ or Mickey Mouse. But some of them just, no, he's so bad, I got to vote for Joe Biden. And this is the thing the media has pushed, that, if you're not going to vote for him, you got to vote for Biden. They knew full well what they were going to get. They knew full well what they were going to get. And they've gotten abortion on demand policies. They've gotten the gay pride flag at the Vatican. Where are the think pieces on them? Because the cultural elite tried to shame evangelical Christians for supporting Donald Trump. They may not like the guy, but they knew he wasn't going to persecute them. Oh, well, and the cultural elite say there is no Christian persecution in America. Pay no attention to the baker in Colorado who is constantly harassed by the government to be put out of business. That's not real persecution because they're not killing him. It's amazing. We've even redefined persecution to claim it isn't so. One of the left-wing postmodern things that comes from critical theory is control of language. You redefine the terms. If you're not dying, you're not being persecuted, according to them. Where's the accountability for these Christians who say, I got to go for Biden because character matters? Where are the big think pieces for them? They're never going to come. That's it. They're never going to happen, but we should at least be willing to acknowledge, and maybe they will be grown up enough to put their big boy pants on and say, turns out voting can be complicated. And sometimes the choices are flawed and you're going for the lesser of two evils as opposed to the evils of two lessers. Maybe, just maybe, they could be somewhat reflective, but really what we're seeing is that The cultural elite will always shame the committed Christian, particularly when there's a difficult vote to be had and they want to participate in the civic process and have to hold their nose to do it. The left loves to point out hypocrisy and then engage in it.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 877.